Hey everyone, I'm Abby Sharp. Welcome to Abby's Kitchen. Today's highly requested review is sponsored by Peak Tea, and we'll be taking a look at DR.MIKE. Now, before we get into it, let's talk about what is in my cup. So you guys know that I'm a coffee drinker, but I've recently been trying to shake it up and have been alternating between Peak Tea's Sun Goddess Matcha and electric turmeric teas. So in the morning, I have the Sun Goddess Matcha, which provides a more steady supply of energy over 4 to 6 hours instead of the 1 to 2 that you get from coffee. Matcha is also packed with antioxidants and polyphenols for gut and heart health, plus a unique amino acid called L-theanine for helping to support stress management. It's like meditation in a cup. And y'all know that I need that trying to wrangle 2 kids in COVID life. A cup of the Sun Goddess Matcha in the afternoon feels like waking up from the best nap. I go from groggy and distracted to alert and productive. Then, after I get Big Boy E to bed, I have my electric turmeric tea, which is made with anti-inflammatory turmeric that's been fermented to improve its bioavailability. That means you're getting the maximum absorption, no black pepper needed. Even though my life is admittedly chaos right now, I am loving my new little routine here and definitely feeling more in control of my energy levels. Not to mention, it's a huge bonus that I can get all of these benefits without the hassle of brewing anything. Because let's be real, what mom has time for that? All you need to do is add the tea to some hot water and stir for the most concentrated antioxidants. So simple. All of Peak Teas are 100% organic, non-GMO, gluten-free, and triple screened for impurities and extracted by cold brew crystallization that gently preserves the active compounds without any brewing needed. If you're looking to switch up your morning cup, check out the link in my description and use the promo code Abbey to get 5% off of your order. Okay, so DR.MIKE is a health influencer and board-certified family medicine doctor who has amassed over 6 million followers on his YouTube channel. He is known for discussing hot medical topics, debunking health myths, reacting to popular medical TV shows, memes, and TikToks, and reviewing popular diets. Most recently, he has also addressed some major accusations that he is fat phobic for being a weight loss advocate, which we will also discuss later on in this video. But before we start, a few quick disclaimers. The information in this video is for educational and entertainment purposes only, so you should always speak to a healthcare provider about your unique healthcare needs. Also, while we do make an effort to include relevant and well-researched content in our videos, please keep in mind that what you see may not fully reflect a creator's diet, as we cannot review the full catalog of videos featured on their channel. Don't forget to please be kind in the comments, both here and on DR.MIKE's channel. Also, a trigger warning that some graphics and discussions may be disturbing to some of my viewers, particularly those who have battled or who are battling disordered eating. So of course, feel free to skip this video if that sounds like you. And finally, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and ring that little bell so that you never miss out on a video. Okay, so to kick things off, let's talk diet. So let's start with DR.MIKE's breakfasts, or I guess lack thereof.
Nowadays, this is my breakfast. Lately, I haven't been eating breakfast. I've become a huge fan of intermittent fasting, where I have 14 to 16 hours since my last meal. Like right now, I'm about to go on national television. I have to be super sharp, talk about CBD. Kind of interesting if you guys want to hear more about CBD. Let it chill for a little bit before I take a sip. Gives me a nice little boost with a tiny bit of caffeine, instead of that caffeine kick that I get if I'm drinking a cup of coffee. I need that sometimes, but not most. In the morning, I'm a big fan of intermittent fasting. I like doing the 16-8 window, so you're only eating throughout 8 hours of the day, but I'm flexible with it. So if a certain day I want to go 14 hours without eating, or I want to skip intermittent fasting for a single week, that's fine. I think when you set up such rigorous demands on yourself, you're almost setting yourself up for failure.
Okay, so DR.MIKE shares that he does the 16-8 method for intermittent fasting, which means that he will fast for 16 hours and have an 8-hour eating window. So according to his What I Eat in a Day, he usually starts his day with either green tea or espresso instead of breakfast, which does not break your fast so long as you don't add any sugar or milk or cream. Now, I will say that some mice studies have even shown that caffeine intake from something like coffee or tea can help to support intermittent fasting by increasing fat oxidation and potentially boosting metabolism. It also may slightly increase the rate of autophagy, aka the process in which your body rids itself of damaged cells. Obviously, we have yet to see these benefits really play out in quality human research, but I assume as a busy doctor, Dr. Mike just really needed the caffeine fix. I get it. With that said, while I'm not an advocate of intermittent fasting for everyone, I really like that Dr. Mike isn't super rigid when it comes to his fast schedule and will sometimes shorten his fast or totally break his fast or opt for a fruit smoothie in the morning instead. Now for lunch, Dr. Mike will usually have a kind of Buddha bowl-like thing of some kind. So one day it's steak, sweet potato, broccoli, and avocado toast on the side. And then another day it's the Chipotle bowl with brown rice, greens, double meat, salsa, cheese, and guac. Love that order. We've got fiber-rich complex carbs from the sweet potato, toast, or rice. We've got healthy fats from the avocado, as well as some protein in the meat, and of course, lots of veg. Both of these meals look and sound super satiating and filling, which is what you need, especially if you're limiting your eating window with intermittent fasting. And I also like that even though Dr. Mike aims to ensure that his meals are nutrient dense, he doesn't sacrifice flavor. So this isn't boiled sauce-free, spice-free, dressing-free food. In fact, he specifically says in his video that if you have to add some ketchup or mayo to encourage yourself to actually eat healthy food, then do that, which is totally aligned with my beliefs as well. Make healthy food taste good. Not only will this make healthy eating far more sustainable for you, but it will also boost up the satisfaction factor and prevent food cravings and binges later on. Dr. Mike also proves that you can build balanced meals even while you're eating out. Yes, of course, fast food fare is going to be higher in salt than your typical at-home meals. In fact, his bowl from Chipotle has over 700 milligrams of salt. However, generally speaking, I would say that these are pretty balanced options for on the go. So for his morning snacks, Dr. Mike keeps it simple and handheld, which I love. So on day one, his post-workout snack is some fruit, which he says provides fiber and an insulin kick. Plus he has 3 hard-boiled eggs for protein and some pink Himalayan sea salt for replenishing those electrolytes. So this is actually a perfect post-workout snack in my books because, like he said, the small insulin response from the fruit will help drive the protein into the muscles. And if he did, in fact, sweat a lot in his workout, adding a little bit of salt in there will help to replenish those stores as well. And that fancy salt, I will say, does have greater amounts of some beneficial electrolytes when compared to table salt. So it has about 3 times potassium, 100 times the magnesium, and 4 times the calcium per gram. However, there's actually more sodium in table salt than pink Himalayan sea salt, which is really the only mineral that's found in substantial quantities in salt, period. So if you are on a budget, just use regular table salt and get your other electrolytes like potassium from more abundant and cheaper sources like a banana or an orange. Just a little insider tip. So in his Harper Bazaar video, he talks about 2 of his favorite general snacks, nuts or a perfect bar, which he describes as being made of superfoods. Not fake news, but not exactly true either. I looked up this bar because I've never tried it myself. And yes, there is about 17 grams of protein, 16 grams of healthy fats, and 3 grams of fiber in each 340-calorie bar. And it's made with nut butter, honey, egg, dairy, and rice protein, and a bunch of oils and a variety of whole food powders. So I mean, sure, it's healthy, and there's nothing wrong with it, but it's also not a magical food either. For the record, there's no such thing as a superfood. It's really just a fancy buzzword used in marketing. So no food has superpowers to make or break your diet. There is merit in literally everything that you can eat. Having said that, Nuts are a pretty fantastic nutritious food and a great snack all on their own because they contain the hunger-crushing combination all by themselves. They've got fiber, protein, and healthy fats. So yeah, both are really great snack options in my books. Now, being a busy doctor and online celebrity, I'm not surprised that we're going to be doing takeout again for dinner, which, if we're being honest with ourselves, is how most of us nowadays eat too. I know a lot of YouTubers that you watch have time to make and style smoothie bowls every single morning, but most people who are juggling really busy work schedules and travel and family just do not have time for that. So I really appreciate the realness. So according to these clips, dinner for Dr. Mike could be a large Greek salad with grilled chicken breast, or it could be assorted sushi on brown rice. Both of these are great takeout options in my opinion. I do think that the Greek salad could use some energizing carbs, just up the satisfaction factor. And the nigiri, while of course a really great source of fat and protein and carbs, could probably do with a side of veg. But when it comes to takeout options, I would say that these two are some of my personal healthy go-tos as well. Finally, Mike ends the day with more nuts or low-sodium sunflower seeds, which he reminds us are rich in healthy fats and protein. So again, always a good choice. In his Harper Bazaar video, he does give a portion control tip to measure out your seeds in a bowl first, because otherwise it's just really easy to go through the whole bag and consume a lot of salt. Now, I know that this may sound like a diet hack, but I think most of us do struggle with mindless eating, especially with snacks. So putting our snack into a bowl or onto a plate can really help us be more intentional and check in with our appetite for more. What I would probably add to Dr. Mike's suggestion, however, is that if you eat your portion of seeds and you're still hungry for more, then honor that and get more. Portioning your food out shouldn't be done as a restriction method, but more of like a way to check in with yourself to pick up on those subtle cues that maybe you've had enough. So on that note, let me give you my overall thoughts on Dr. Mike's diet and relationship with food. So from what I can see, Dr. Mike is certainly passionate about nutrition, which is such a nice bonus to see in a physician. He's always thinking about how to optimize his meals by incorporating more healthy fats, complex carbs, lean proteins, and veggies into his meals, while also understanding how to properly refuel after a workout and stay satisfied throughout the day. I also really love that he's not super rigid when it comes to intermittent fasting. His general philosophy when it comes to eating is to aim for a whole food diet while also decreasing refined sugars and processed foods. So kind of similar to like a Mediterranean diet. This is definitely a philosophy that I can get behind, as this way of eating seems enjoyable to him and is also supported by substantial research. I did, however, pick up on a bit of diet culture language, so words like clean and cheat meal and superfood and low calorie all came up regularly in my research, and I also noticed that he tends to keep tabs on his caloric intake. Now, this is not to say that there's anything inherently wrong or problematic with calorie tracking or choosing lower calorie foods, especially if this is something that helps you to achieve your personal health goals. However, it can be an issue for some individuals if it becomes obsessive and interferes with one's enjoyment of food and quality of life. Thankfully, I am seeing Dr. Mike practice some general flexibility in his eating regime, so hopefully that's not the case for him. So now that we've looked at his diet, I want to take a minute to unpack some of the nutrition-focused content on his channel, starting with his experience, perspectives, and claims about the keto diet. Let's take a look.
The ketogenic diet is good for the brain. The truth of the matter is, the jury's still out on this one because science hasn't given us the answer. The research on this area just hasn't been completed yet. Anecdotally, some people say they feel more focused or sharper when they're ketogenic diet, but I've also heard from patients of mine that they feel foggier and that keto flu stays with them much longer than anticipated. So I don't like using anecdotes as reasons why a certain diet is good or not. I need quality research, which I just don't have.
Yes, a man after my own research-obsessed heart. Okay, let me elaborate on what Mike so succinctly described. It's true that many people have reported that the keto diet makes them feel more mentally sharp, but as Dr. Mike suggests, this is largely anecdotal. However, since this video was released in 2018, we have seen some evidence emerge. For example, one 2019 study found that a high-fat diet may have neuroprotective effects and may help reduce oxidative stress and inflammation in the brain. Then another study from 2020 found that ketones can increase the stability of brain networks, which can potentially protect against brain aging. Now, keep in mind that these benefits are likely attributed to an increase in anti-inflammatory healthy monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats in the diet, which wouldn't likely be seen in a keto diet rich in saturated and trans fats. And as we can see from Googling keto recipes on Pinterest, it's really not hard for people to go swinging that way when eating bacon on cheese on meat. So quality of diet is really important here. Also, even though this research may speak to some of the potential brain protective effects of keto, it doesn't necessarily suggest that you'll feel any more sharp. So I agree with Mike on that the jury is still out on this, and we really need some more quality research to make any solid claims.
Answer. Where keto diet really shines is in type 2 diabetes. Because when you have type 2 diabetes, you have insulin sensitivity issues, you have high sugar content in the blood, and research has shown over and over again that the ketogenic diet for type 2 diabetes works.
So while I agree with Dr. Mike that there is research supporting the keto diet for people with type 2 diabetes, there are also some potential drawbacks that are important to mention here. For example, while a keto diet may help to stabilize blood sugar levels due to the lack of carbs, depending on the high-fat foods that are chosen, there is also an increased risk of high cholesterol, which is already an important risk factor for this population. So a strict keto diet may not be the best option for people who currently have or are genetically predisposed to high cholesterol levels. In addition, the Diabetes Clinical Practice Guidelines continue to recommend eating patterns that emphasize high-fiber complex carbohydrates, which have been proven to help lower cholesterol levels and stabilize blood sugars. So some examples of this type of eating pattern would include the Mediterranean diet, the DASH diet, or vegan and vegetarian diets. So while yes, the keto diet may help to stabilize blood sugar levels in some people, it definitely would not be considered the gold standard when it comes to dietary recommendations for diabetes.
The ketogenic diet has shown some promise in the field of oncology, aka cancer. It's not ready to be a prime-time cancer treatment just yet, and the research doesn't fully support it to be a preventive measure for developing cancer. But what we do know is that some promise is there, and more research needs to be done.
Okay, to echo Mike's sentiments, while there is some research to suggest that the keto diet may help to treat or prevent cancer by depriving cancer cells of glucose, we need a lot more large-scale trials to make this a go-to treatment option. Most of the animal research that we have suggests that the keto diet may be a good complementary therapy when used in combination with other conventional cancer treatments. But some experts suggest that it is way too early to know if the benefits outweigh the possible risks, especially because strict adherence to a keto diet can be really challenging. For example, one 2010 case study found that even though keto resulted in slow tumor progression, once the patient went off the keto diet, tumor progression resumed. It's also important to note that weight loss is often already a symptom of cancer, and it's not generally intentional or a good sign of health, as cancer patients often experience elevated metabolism, nausea, difficulty chewing or swallowing, loss of appetite, and loss of taste. So in these cases, limiting one's diet by going keto would be the last thing you would want to do. Ultimately, this would be a highly individual recommendation, and like Mike said, more research is really key. Now, a year later, Dr. Mike actually decides to try out the diet himself, and his experience brought him to this conclusion. Let's take a look.
For the average healthy person, going on a short course of keto will help them lose some weight, and it probably won't be detrimental to their health.
Okay, so Dr. Mike's experience is not uncommon. While we know that the keto diet can result in short-term weight loss and increased feelings of fullness, it can also be inconvenient and unsustainable over time, lead to decreased exercise performance, at least in the early days, and increased constipation due to the lack of fiber-rich carbs. However, Dr. Mike also mentions that someone can go on the keto diet for short-term weight loss and it probably won't be detrimental to their health. I don't necessarily disagree, even though this does not consider the potential emotional toll of dieting on some individuals. But I also don't think that we should be talking about short-term weight loss, period, when we know that statistically, most people who lose weight in the short run stop the diet and then gain it right back. We also know that this weight cycling can put someone at risk for detrimental health effects, such as an increased risk of insulin resistance, heart disease, blood pressure, inflammation, and an increased risk of mortality overall. With that said, I do appreciate that Dr. Mike doesn't necessarily advocate for the keto diet, and he offers pretty unbalanced feedback and recommendations surrounding it. He talks about the evidence-based benefits of the diet while also highlighting important risks, the lack of research on the long-term effects, and also how difficult the keto diet can be to adhere to. Now let's take a look at what Dr. Mike has to say about intermittent fasting.
Intermittent fasting is not starving. When you're fasting, your body is using stored nutrients and stored energy forms in order to make your body continue to function. When you're starving, you've run out of those energy sources and are breaking down vital tissues like organs to get that same energy. An increase in growth hormone, a decrease in insulin, and that alone will help you lose weight. Next, because you're skipping meals or even going days without eating meals, it's very likely that when you look throughout the week, you'll be eating fewer calories.
Okay, so it's definitely true that intermittent fasting isn't necessarily the same thing as starving. In fact, I talked about this in my Ask Abbey video here, actually. But I genuinely believe that there are a lot of non-punishing reasons to try intermittent fasting or keto or low-fat diet or whatever, as long as it serves one's physical and emotional health. It really comes down to intentions and how this way of eating makes you feel about your body, food, and your self-worth. I also want to point out that intermittent fasting doesn't automatically result in a caloric deficit or even necessarily skipping a meal. You're simply just delaying and shortening the period of time in which you can eat. With that in mind, you can theoretically consume the same amount of calories, but in a shorter time frame. This is actually why often intermittent fasting doesn't work so well for weight loss for some people, since they're just so hungry by the time that they do get to their meal that they overeat. However, for people who prefer to eat smaller, more frequent meals throughout the day, intermittent fasting may naturally result in a caloric deficit because it doesn't necessarily align with their natural hunger and satiety cues. And that's not necessarily so good either, because in that case, it's likely not very sustainable. With that said, the weight loss impacts of intermittent fasting is not only attributed to caloric restriction, but rather it may also be related to the hormonal shifts that Dr. Mike mentions. So research suggests that intermittent fasting can increase growth hormone by as much as 5 times, as well as decrease insulin levels, both of which may help to facilitate some minor fat burning.
Of what you should eat. We don't know how many calories, we don't know what foods to eat on the days or times that you actually are eating. Second, we don't know which form of IF is best. Third, there are some side effects when you are fasting that people do experience. Headaches, mental fog, heartburn. These things do exist. It's not totally benign. 4, we don't know the consequences of following an intermittent fasting diet long term. Most, if not all of these studies are done on the short term. If you are eating a very unhealthy diet and then make a change, you're definitely going to see a benefit. But now, does this benefit still hold up 1, 2, 3, 10 years down the line? We don't know that yet when it comes to IF. And 5, it's not easy for everybody to fight off those cravings on fasting days.
I definitely agree with all the shortcomings Dr. Mike states here, and I would also like to add that intermittent fasting can also interfere with the social aspect of eating if it doesn't align with your defined eating window. However, for people like Dr. Mike who are pretty flexible with intermittent fasting, this might not necessarily be an issue. It also could be problematic, particularly for individuals with diabetes and low blood pressure, where eating regularly is really key to managing symptoms.
I think that if you can skip a meal, you can skip a breakfast here and there, you're gonna see some benefits. Does that mean you should go on this very rigid diet where you're doing the 5 and 2 or 16 and 8? I don't think we should quite make this a religious, rigorous part of our everyday life because we don't know the long-term consequences of it. But in a society that's prone to overeating, a fasting day won't hurt.
While I do appreciate that Dr. Mike acknowledges that intermittent fasting doesn't need to be a rigid eating pattern, I would have definitely appreciated a disclaimer that skipping a meal here and there is not beneficial for everyone across the board. And this is especially true for those who struggle with disordered eating and restriction, where intentionally skipping a meal can potentially trigger a binge. And even though Dr. Mike is clearly well versed in the research on intermittent fasting, I get the impression that he may view intermittent fasting more so as a way to kind of cut calories and restrict foods for the purposes of weight loss. Like I said, there are other evidence-based non-weight loss benefits of fasting, things like lowering insulin levels and improved cholesterol profile, etc. So it would be nice to hear a little bit more about that. Okay, let's round out his diet reviews with his 30-day vegan challenge.
I have to be honest and admit that I don't generally recommend veganism as my first option. I do know that it's a restrictive diet, and we know restrictive diets have high failure rates. Plus, the benefits of a vegan diet aren't that much better than some of the other alternatives that are simpler to follow. When I recommend a diet, I'm trying to create the healthiest diet, but also one that's feasible and achievable for my patients to face without disrupting their lives. On the other hand, if one of my patients comes in and wants to follow a vegan diet, I'm totally in support of that. I just have to make sure that they're adequately planning their meals, they're supplementing when need be, checking their blood tests, and ideally having some guidance either from myself or a nutritionist. The research behind health benefits of following a vegan diet are substantial and high quality. If you're following the standard American diet and then switch over to a vegan diet, you're gonna see improvement in chronic diseases like diabetes, heart disease, strokes, even an extension of life in some cases. And what's most interesting is when we add some animal products into the mix, those outcomes still hold true. That's why what I recommend to my patients is a plant-focused diet, meaning that they should get the majority of their calories from plants, fruits, vegetables, legumes, nuts, seeds, healthy fats, and a moderate amount of poultry and fish with a minimal amount of red meat. In fact, that's the diet I follow and recommend to my own family.
Amen. It is so nice to see an influencer promote the idea that eating well is not a one-size-fits-all model. As for lumping veganism in with other diets, what I've learned from reviewing vegan YouTubers for a while now is that language can be really important, and that plant-based is the diet while veganism is the lifestyle. I also know that my vegan friends would disagree with Dr. Mike saying that veganism is restrictive. My experience tells me that, like any way of eating, it will feel wrong to some people and right to others. And like Dr. Mike, the only concern that I would have is making sure that the diet is well planned with consideration for vitamins B12, calcium, D, zinc, and iron. And while there are undoubtedly a number of health benefits associated with a vegan diet, which I discussed in my video right here, I agree that we don't all necessarily have to go all in to reap those rewards. So if strict veganism isn't for you, like Dr. Mike, I also recommend aiming to incorporate more plant-based foods and more plant-based proteins in the diet however you can. It has to be sustainable. So let's hear about some of his struggles on a plant-based diet.
I ran into on the vegan diet was under eating calories. Now, I'm partially to blame here because I didn't prep well. And even at the opening of this video, I said the healthy way to follow a vegan diet is to adequately plan your meals. For the first 2 weeks,
Okay, I do agree that transitioning to a plant-based diet does require some planning and thought to ensure that you're meeting all of your nutrient needs, at least until it becomes more intuitive to you. So Dr. Mike's experience is not unique in that plant-based foods do tend to be lower in calories and fat, which can result in some modest weight loss, which may not be intentional. But overall, seeing that vegan diets are naturally lower in calories and fat and higher in fiber, you may need to make an effort to include more calorically dense, fat-rich foods into your diet to really make sure that you're meeting all of your nutrient needs. And while veganism isn't a weight loss diet, research does suggest that plant-based diets are associated with greater weight loss than non-vegetarian diets, largely because all that extra fiber is so inherently satiating. So this may be partially why Dr. Mike experienced a drop-off in appetite, or maybe, like he said, he just wasn't really feeling all those beans. And speaking of beans,
The whole plane ride, I'm sitting next to a doctor. My stomach is going, blah, 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 blah. I had to ask him to stand up like 3-4 times. From day one up until the last day of the diet, I was having tremendous gas and bloating. It's so embarrassing to say. I mean, think about this. I fly on planes. I interact with patients for long periods of time. I sit in conferences. I can't just be sitting there flatulent.
Sounds about right. Again, if you're going from a typical American or omnivorous diet to strict plant-based overnight, you can expect it to cause some initial discomfort. Think about it. You're probably seeing a dramatic increase in fiber and FODMAP-rich beans, legumes, veggies, and fruit, all of which can take a toll on your gut. However, these symptoms usually subside in time as your microbiome composition changes and adjusts to breaking down those fibers. So I talk about the relationship between the vegan diet and bloating in my video right here. But to summarize the takeaways, you can mitigate these symptoms by slowly increasing your fiber intake over time. My colleague Andrea Hardy, who specializes in gut health, suggests that while there is no standardized protocol for increasing fiber intakes, as a general rule of thumb, she suggests increasing fiber by about 5 grams a day while monitoring for digestive tolerance. If you start to experience symptoms of digestive distress like bloating, gas, or discomfort, hold steady for a bit or just decrease your intake until they resolve. You can also make sure to cook your vegetables, also soak your dried beans really well, and choose lower FODMAP plant-based foods more often. And if you need a refresher on FODMAPs, you can check out my video right here. So as a dietitian who watches a lot of YouTubers waffle between different diets on the regular, I actually really like Dr. Mike's diet reviews for their combination of personal anecdotes and experience and generally unbiased evidence-based acknowledgement of the potential benefits and challenges. I also appreciate that he doesn't endorse any of the diets he reviews to everyone across the board and consistently emphasizes that there is no one-size way to eat well. Now moving on to something a little more controversial, I do want to address Dr. Mike's professional approach to weight loss and how he recently responded to the public allegations that he was fat phobic. Let's take a look.
In the United States, obesity has become an epidemic. So I understand why most people want to lose weight. It's actually been proven in the best quality studies. Keeping your weight healthy is one of the most important things you can do to maintain your health, to live a long life. So if you're trying to lose weight.
Here's my 2 cents just from what I've seen from Dr. Mike. While I do think that his nutrition recommendations are always pretty evidence-based and unbiased in terms of what's good or bad, much of his discussion around nutrition does tend to revolve around losing weight and calories. And I get why. I mean, as a doctor, he knows that people are mainly motivated to change their diet so that they can change their pant size. This is just the world that we live in. This is what people want and what people fixate on. As a dietitian, I believe that there is no shame in having aesthetic goals or weight-related health goals. That is no less of a valid reason to change your diet, for example, than to improve your heart health. But it's also important to note that focusing on things that we can control, like behaviors, rather than things that we can't necessarily, like weight, may help people maintain those lifestyle changes even if the scale doesn't budge. And this is important because we know that health is not exclusively measured by someone's weight. In fact, there is ample research to suggest that we can be overweight or even obese and still be considered metabolically healthy. That's not to say that obesity doesn't contribute to a host of detrimental health effects, as this is well documented in the literature as well. So I absolutely agree with him here. But I would just adjust Dr. Mike's statement that keeping a healthy weight is one of the most important things that you can do to maintain your health. And instead, I would shift the focus by saying eating a balanced diet, moving your body, getting adequate sleep, and managing your stress levels are some of the most important things that you can do to maintain your health and live a long life. See what I did there? Something that you can't control versus behaviors that are within reach. We will find our healthiest, happiest weight when we focus our energy here. Of course, this was just like an off-the-cuff statement, so I will give Dr. Mike the benefit of the doubt here. He obviously is a highly educated health professional, and honestly, I would just have to assume that he understands and takes into account all of the social, economic, physical, and mental contributors to health. So that brings me to the next big question. Do these views and opinions on weight and weight loss automatically make him fat phobic? Well, let's take a closer look at some of the accusations.
But I take his health and nutrition videos with a grain of salt. Don't forget that much of the research within medicine comes from a fat-phobic stance, so I feel it can be difficult for medical professionals to move away from that. I don't understand what fat-phobic, how it's being used in this healthiest version of themselves. Being overweight is not just a problem for heart attack, stroke risk, it's a problem for your entire health. Cancer risk, sleep, happiness, everything suffers when disease goes up.
Here's the thing. I'm not sure I agree with the blanket statement that being overweight is a problem for your entire health. It absolutely can be, or it can impact elements of health like increasing the risk of high blood pressure, high blood sugars, joint pain, infertility, heart disease, cancer risk, sleep and liver diseases, sleep disorders, etc. But one's weight doesn't automatically dictate their health status. In fact, studies have found that 1/3 to 3/4 of people who are classified as obese are actually metabolically healthy. To drive this point home even further, a 2016 study found that unfit, skinny people were twice as likely to get diabetes as fit, fat people. So like I always say, being overweight is one potential risk factor, not a death sentence by any means. The reason why this misconception is important to dismantle is that exclusively focusing on weight as the primary indicator of health can often lead to inadequate access to quality healthcare and misguided health recommendations. Now, I'm absolutely not implying that Dr. Mike or that all doctors and health professionals discriminate based on weight. Based on my own experience, that is absolutely untrue. However, we do have research to suggest that weight discrimination and anti-fat bias is highly prevalent in healthcare settings. One review of the literature found that healthcare professionals' negative perceptions of larger bodied folks can lead to misdiagnosis and missed diagnoses, which in turn negatively impacts outcomes. The research also found that fat patients who experience or anticipate experiencing weight bias from medical professionals often seek medical care less often, and when they do, are less likely to comply with their doctor's suggestions. We also have research to suggest that doctors will often have shorter appointments and visits with fat patients and show less emotional rapport, and that these can put individuals at risk for diabetes, heart disease, discrimination, eating disorders, sedentariness, and even early death. That is a really big problem. I mean, in my circles as allied health, you hear these awful stories of women complaining to their doctors about shortness of breath, only to be quickly told to just lose weight and then later find themselves in the ER for a pulmonary embolism. It's scary stuff. So again, I can only give Dr. Mike the benefit of the doubt that this is not how he counsels his patients. He seems like a pretty conscientious and empathetic guy. But I can see why some larger-bodied Reddit users may feel scorned by experiences that they've experienced with the medical community.
Doctors also believe that obesity is a disease and that BMI is a good predictor of health. Sadly, most medical professionals are living in diet culture and fat phobia as much as the rest of the population. It's wild that doctors tell patients to lose weight when diets have a 95% failure rate and often leave people in worse shape than when they started. Can you imagine if doctors prescribed any other treatment or medication with 95% chance of failure? This is a good point to talk about. When we prescribe a diet plan or nutrition plan, the reason that it fails is because adherence is low. Changing someone's behavior is quite difficult, and we haven't mastered that art as physicians, as a healthcare system, really. But it doesn't mean that we're failing because we're fat phobic. I do think it's
I respectfully agree to disagree, and this one I feel pretty strongly about. By suggesting that diets fail because of low adherence, we're shifting the blame onto the individual when we know that there are a number of other genetic, social, metabolic, and medical factors that can influence someone's ability to lose weight. He said it himself in this video. It also casts a lot of shame and guilt on larger body folks for burdening the healthcare system with their body. And people's failure to lose weight is also not just because we as clinicians are not doing a good enough job as motivators either. That still suggests that weight is 100% within an individual's control. When we look at the research on why diets fail, nowhere in there does it say that it's due to low adherence. In fact, the most common reason why diets fail and most people gain the weight back is not because people are not motivated, but because there are a number of metabolic adaptations and compensatory mechanisms that occur in the body to force us back to our comfortable weight. The Biggest Loser research is a great example of this, where losers experienced drastic reductions in their metabolic rate, which resulted in them gaining the weight right back. Did these contestants adhere to their prescripted restrictive weight loss diet? Yes, they did. Were they not motivated enough? Yes, I would say that they were. This is simply how the body responds in defense to one's comfortable body weight. And I talk about this in more detail in my metabolic damage video here. But it's very common to see hormonal shifts following extreme weight loss that leave us more hungry, more lethargic, and less efficient at burning calories. Now, considering that Dr. Mike tends to view nutrition and patient-centered care, is it possible to advocate for weight loss and not be fat phobic? I think a really important distinction here, particularly as a healthcare professional, comes from the quality of care provided and ensuring that you're consistently patient-centered, regardless of how much somebody weighs. Let's look at the whole picture. Are there reasons beyond someone's weight why someone might experience a set of symptoms? Can we focus on other biomarkers as evidence of improved health status rather than just weight alone? Are there nutritional or other lifestyle recommendations that we can give that can help to improve health, even if weight doesn't change? Can we shift the focus to behaviors instead of the number on the scale in general? And can we work with a patient or client to help them achieve the symptom management that they want in a way that feels sustainable to them? So I think if a patient is interested in losing weight to help manage their health, then this is a great conversation to have. And a doctor's enthusiasm in helping to guide that journey would be supportive and client-centered, not evidence of fat phobia. But when medical professionals let diet culture cloud their ability to see the patient's case holistically, it makes for a less productive and in some cases dangerous interaction. Here's the thing. We all carry an enormous amount of internalized bias, not just about body weight and fatness, but about all sorts of things. Most of us have to consciously work really hard to unpack this, and we still let it slip out. I pick up on my internalized fat phobia often, and I'm constantly trying to unlearn these tendencies, as uncomfortable as it is, all while maintaining an evidence-based approach. It's really hard. This is the world that we live in, and it's nearly impossible to escape it, especially for those of us actively working within health and wellness culture. So I'm not faulting Dr. Mike for not being perfect with his language, since most of us have a lot to learn. I'm just hoping that he is open to this learning, the same way that he seems really enthusiastic and open about upgrading his knowledge in response to all of the constant updates in nutrition and medical research. We are all on our own little journey here. So in conclusion, despite some of our differences in our views on weight loss, largely just our relative emphasis, I would say that I agree with the majority of Dr. Mike's health philosophies when it comes to nutrition. Not only does he have an overall balanced and evidence-based approach, but he also recognizes that the field of nutrition is highly complex and that there is no universal diet or one-size-fits-all for everyone. And as a fellow healthcare professional, I can appreciate having another evidence-based voice of reason here on YouTube providing the facts on nutrition and health. And on that note, that is all for today's video. If you liked it, be sure to give it the thumbs up. Let me know below who you'd like to see me review next. Subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time on Abby's Kitchen. Bye!